Hello and welcome to the latest REFI Global webinar as part of our series. And this one is on global technology. My name is Sam Dale and I'm the editor of REFI. And it's great to see so many of you joining us today. We have a fantastic panel who should be coming up on the screen right now to talk about technology. Obviously, over the last year, technology has become more important than ever in all businesses, but in the real estate sector and for real estate fund managers, managing your portfolios, increasing fundraising capabilities, sourcing and executing deals, and real-time reporting to your clients. Technology is revolutionizing all of those areas, and the last year has really accelerated many of those trends. So that's the kind of things we're going to be talking about: how to improve your performance, how to kind of take some of the back office out of the investment process and make it more efficient. And also how to better manage and source, execute and use data. So hopefully we'll get some interesting discussion today. You'll be able to ask questions at any point to the panel. I will come to them at the end. You can do that through a QR code on the bottom of your screen at the moment, or on the top of your screen now. And if you use that on your phone, you'll go straight to the website and you can ask a question. Alternatively, you can go to slido.com, the website on your screen, slido.com, and use the hashtag REFIWebinar, and you'll be able to ask a question as well. So do encourage you to do that, and we'll try and get to as many as we can. If you find that too difficult to execute, just go to the chat function on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll make sure that question comes to the panel as well. One final thing, there's a handout as well on the right-hand side of your screen. It's from MRI and it's about the critical need for technology. So I do encourage you to take a look at that. It's free to look at, so well worth looking at, and a good companion to this discussion today as well. So enough from me for now. Lynn, do you want to introduce yourself to kick things off?
Yes, great. Thank you. And thank you everybody for having me. My name is Lynn Peters. I'm the Vice President of Global Operations for Retransform. Essentially, Retransform is a service provider in the technology, business process management, and analytics space, serving the commercial real estate industry globally. So pleasure to be here and look forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lynn. And then Kath.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Pleased to be a part of this panel discussion. And first of all, thanks to the REFI team for organizing this and hosting this. So my name is Kanat Kalyan, and I'm a marketing and sales director with Oxane Partners. In terms of what we do at Oxane, we are a technology-driven solutions provider, and we support real estate investment firms, through the life cycle of a trade. On this webinar today, I'm representing not just our marketing team, but more importantly, our technology team, who's been really the force behind the tech platform that we've developed, the real estate investment management platform called Oxane Crest. And in the last 5 years, we were able to manage, add about 200 billion, either in direct real estate or trades which are secured by real estate as an underlying asset class. Thank you for having me, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, and Eric next.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, my name is Eric Hogan. I'm the Vice President of our financial and investment solutions at MRI Software. MRI Software is a global provider of real estate solutions across commercial, residential, the occupier space, and really every gamut of real estate management and ownership globally. And my specific focus is on anything to do with accounting and ultimately managing assets and portfolios through valuations, investor relations, and performance measurement and forecasting. Happy to be here. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, and Nakash.
Hi, thank you, Sam, and thank you for the REFI team for having me. So Nakash, I'm a director and head of systems state. I also co-chair the Innovation Council for Europe. So Predictive Real Estate is a global real estate manager. We invest in equity and debt businesses, and also across all the sectors from retail, office, residential, industrial, logistics, etc. My role is really looking after the investment processes, investment technologies, and how we can actually make it more efficient, and how we can actually then on the innovation side, how we can actually add more value to our assets, and also have a more engagement with our customers then.
Great, thank you. So got a great mix on the panel here today. So hopefully we'll be able to touch on a few different things. But I just want to kick off with a pretty broad question. I'm going to start with Alec. The last year has obviously been tumultuous and a lot of change. It's been a catalyst for a lot of change, particularly in technology more generally. So how has it reshaped the real estate business? What's been the key innovations over the last year?
Well, it is a broad question, and we could probably spend the entire hour just answering this one question because it's multifaceted. You've got, before the pandemic hit, real estate companies in general were beginning to accelerate their adoption of technology. There was just more data to process, more factors to consider in the strategic planning process. And of course, the pandemic just has come in and said, you're not moving fast enough. And by that, I mean, we now have even more data points to consider. Right? It's not just the environment and sustainability, which is sort of one of the newer factors that a lot of real estate investors are looking at, but now safety and health and also the type of experience that residents and tenants and occupiers are going to have inside the building and around the building. We know now, even more so than before the pandemic, that it's actually going to take a lot for someone to get out of their home, get on a train, get in a taxi, get on a bus, get in their car, and actually make their way to another location in order to ultimately do something that they could do at home if they wanted to. We're talking shopping, working, etc. And so I think the need for technology in the post-pandemic world has been accelerated on two fronts. One is getting as much data as possible into an accurate and complete sort of consumable format that can then be actioned. Decisions can be made quickly and then actioned in a very quick and efficient process. And then on the other side, getting that data out to the people who care about it, the stakeholders, the shareholders, the residents, the tenants, being able to measure performance in real time. Tenants and residents want to be able to, submit work orders and requests and talk to their landlords and their property managers, in real time, virtually. These sorts of technological need for getting data out and allowing for efficient communication and feedback loops is going to be critical.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Obviously, if I could just turn to you and maybe pick up the last point there. On instant communication now is probably more important than ever in terms of after going through a crisis last year. I think communications picked up between investors and naturally as investors wanted more information, and I think that's probably fair to say it's continued and probably transformed the way that operates. So I wonder whether you could talk a little bit about that and maybe anything else you have to add on how PGIM has maybe adopted different types of technology over the last year to kind of adapt and what you've seen change.
Sure. I personally think it's not about the new technologies. It's about adoption of those technologies. So we, for example, at PGIM, we already had a roadmap planned out for the last 3 years, where we want to be, what we want to achieve. Is that pandemic has just not just us, but really enforced us to accelerate all those programs. And as data becomes key for us, is actually the availability of data then becomes key, and the quality of data. So how quickly we can get access to our data. I mean, is it live or is it on quarterly basis? And then there are two key factors. One actually is the regulators. So regulators will be, and we already see that trend, that they will be asking more data and more, you can say, timely data, and also our investors. So traditionally, we know that most of us, we do quarterly reports that's 45-60 days after the quarter end. But we already see the trend that it's going to change. Investors ask for more granular data and more frequent data. So no longer, 45, 60 days after the quarter end, they will be expecting that. And plus, if you want to, I mean, as an industry, where we want to go, we want to really, you can say, attract the retail market of investors. So the only way we can do it if we can have these data on the fingertips, and they can actually look at the data, look at the performance of the assets on a very regular basis. So some of the new technologies that, I mean, we've done quite a lot of POCs in the last 1 year. I believe, on the top of my head, I can count by 16 POCs I've looked through we're doing. So, I mean, the key ones really, because of the scenario, we couldn't really visit offices or building or inspection. So we're looking at some drone technologies, some virtual touring. We looked at that. Also, we looked at more on the ESG side. So really looking at how we can actually improve. We committed to be carbon neutral by 2050, but we need to, have steps to achieve that. So really starting from basic understanding of energy consumptions and where we can actually improve. So there's lots of things that's going on in last few months. I don't want to go on and on, but these were like a kind of summary of what we've done at PHM, what I see as trends.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I know it's a bit difficult, like Eric said, it's a bit of a broad, difficult question, but it's good to get a bit of a summary about what you're up to and a bit of a broad overview. I'd kind of ask the same to you. How's the last 12 months been for you and your clients, and what have you seen change the most?
Sure, absolutely. I think I couldn't agree more with Eric and Akash. I think in terms of the demands from both investors as well as regulators for more data, for more frequent data, I think that's obviously become very clear in the last 1.5 years or so. Now I think what's interesting is also there's a change in perception. I mean, if you were to ask me this question, Sam, about 1.5 years back, I mean, we would be clueless as well. What we ended up doing was, we did like a short survey, of real estate investment firms globally, and I think the results were sort of, speaking for themselves. What came out was, 2 out of every 3 investment firms, they definitely had reprioritization in terms of their technology goals. So there was definitely, a lot of change in intent, which we could see, we could measure, right? This is, right at the middle of the crisis last year. But I think what's lacking is, that translation into action. So while there is still a lot of intent, it hasn't translated directly into a lot of action. There have been, I think, some improvements though, which have been, I would say, more driven by, necessity rather than sort of, a good to have. I mean, one of the examples, from a technology innovation point of view that immediately comes to my mind is, augmented reality has been, around for some time. But, if you look at, what happened last year, people couldn't really go out, but you got to still do certain deeds. And what essentially translated it into was, more adoption from an augmented reality point of view, where even, from the comfort of, your study, you could really visit the property, right, and, get, at least some deals done. Not in the first 2 quarters, but, definitely towards the last quarter or so. So that, I think, essentially gives us a clear indication that from an adoption point of view, while the intent is there, it's increasing like really good because of certain pressures, from other key stakeholders. I think the adoption is also slowly, catching up. So that's what I would add.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Kanav. And Lynn, thanks for being so patient. I mean, one of the things, I'll ask you the same question, but I think I say this as the editor of a publication for real estate fund management, so I say it with love, but it can be a bit of an old school sector in a way, and the fund management sector, and a bit slow to adopt technology and adopt a culture of data and technology. So I just wonder whether maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and the same question about what's changed in the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And you're right. Ours is certainly an industry that is filled with tradition and habits, and just historically is known to be a little bit slower in the adoption of newer technologies. As an industry, we are creatures of habit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I would certainly echo many of the sentiments my colleagues on this panel have said, in that, if anything, the last year has really put a spotlight on the gaps and, the need for the acceleration and the adoption of technology in real estate, whether that was, the digitization of information, the access to real-time and transparent and accurate information. Really, this situation and this pandemic really accelerated and put an extreme focus on that. So I think that's had a, oddly enough, I don't want to say positive effect, but it really is forcing kind of the speed by which we respond and look at what are the technology solutions out there available to me to help to each of our points, have visibility into my data. Is it accurate? How can I make decisions? And let's be honest, there was so much going on in the industry, and having to be nimble and agile and our ability to make informed decisions. And the reality of those decisions will come to fruition now in this next 12 to 18 months. So certainly, 2020 will certainly go down and most memorable, I'm sure, but 2021 will certainly have some real effects on the decisions we've made in the last 12 months, 12 to 18 months, 14.
Yeah, I think add on to what Lynn said. It's a very important point. It's actually what we've done to tackle the problem. So whilst we found ourselves in a COVID and unable to access our assets, unable to meet people, how we were able to, for example, get around that. So there was a lot of reactionary things we've done, or have you done those things keeping in mind in the future? Because if you've done a reaction thing that it's not long, and you're going to be back to the same position if that you actually cannot even find out what your exposure is, where your tenants are and what is the biggest tenants, etc. Some basic information about your portfolio. So it's really, we got found out, a lot of us got found out back in 2020, but we had the opportunity to reassess, and then we really plan for the future and solve these issues but having the future in mind rather than just being reactionary. So that's very, very key and important to not have a short-term stopgap solution, but having a long-term solution.
Long-term, right.
Yeah, and Nikesh, it's a nice segue into the question I was going to ask, which is, how do you go from firefighting to sort of building that? Because I'm sure, I mean, you tell me really, but I'm sure March, April, May last year, you were pulled every which way trying to solve problems that in a virtual environment. But how do you kind of go from that to sort of building those kind of long-term solutions, or has it been a natural process at your firm?
Yeah, I think the important thing, as I said, it's really prioritizing what we want and where we want to be. I look at future in 2 years term at a time. So I look at where I want to be in 2 years, where we want to be as a firm in 2 years, and take those decisions which are long-lasting rather than just a short-term solution. So I believe the way I see the future is from where I'm sitting is that one of the key problems we still have, and is an industry problem, is the problem of data, is the problem of data quality, and the reliability of data. So a lot of us, asset managers, still pick up the phone to their kind of agents and say, okay, can you tell me who my assets or who my tenants are? So we want to get away from that, because where we want to be is, in a world where we have all the data in one place, reliable, not just for reporting. Reporting is, I think, is a very small use of data. It's actually what you can build on top of that. So all your analytics to tell you about, you've kind of and drive your future strategy, like which asset you need to invest in and what sector or region, etc. you need. Just the reporting problem, I think that will be a short-sighted issue. We need to plan for the future whereby we have the to do most of the analytics and we just do a sense check and gut feeling, etc. So that's where I think we will focus on, and that's where we want to go.
Great. Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about data and data management. And I mean, I think, you know, Nakash touched on this, but I think there's some stat out there about 2%, only 2% of data is usable, and the rest of it's kind of not. So kind of finding that 2% and using it is often the difficult part. So Lynn, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of data analytics and use of data and how firms are kind of getting better at that? You know, there's the sourcing aspect, but once it comes in, how do you make sure it's usable, efficient, easy for the fund managers to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think we've all heard the expression garbage in, garbage out. So fundamentally, we've got to start with good, accurate information as the foundation and the building block for all the decisions that are going to go forward. At the end of the day, ultimately, everything is about driving, you know, your bottom line and what improving NOI and managing your portfolio of assets and how do I drive value. And that can be through any number of elements of information and data that is needed to make informed decisions, whether it's, you know, co-tenancy clauses of a lease in the retail sector. What is the effect if this tenant A closes to the effect of, you know, the rest of a particular asset? How does, you know, the loan covenants factor in? You know, if I make decision A, does it have an implication on what my debt coverage ratio looks like? And therefore now I've got something there I need to consider. You know, obviously, as we look to releasing strategies and the dichotomy in the industry, right, of, you know, you had some positive eruption in our data center, industrial, healthcare, cell tower, you know, that segment, whereas hospitality, retail, office were negatively impacted. So certainly understanding what the implications are of tenant improvements, increased concessions, all of those decisions will factor into, you know, the success and, you know, future of your portfolio of assets. So finding the right partner or the organization or team to make sure that you're building that information to begin with that's correct to make informed, educated decisions. And as many of you have touched on, you know, long gone are the days of, you know, I can wait until 30, 45 days after quarter end or month end. There's a real need and demand for that real-time access to information and accurate information. And that's affecting every component of the life cycle in our industry. So from the tenant experience, the consumer, operationally, investment perspective, ownership, lender, every part and piece is certainly instrumental and really plays a big part in the success, as I said, of the assets. So.
Great, thanks, Lynn. Kind of, you obviously have a you obviously deal with data management issues quite a lot. Well, what's kind of how important has it become now, and what's the kind of key issues in analytics at the moment?
Correct. I think, you know, if you Sam, if you look at, you know, sort of, you know, the root cause, as Nakash was pointing out, it's about, you know, the industry is sort of, you know, very heterogeneous, right? So, you know, one property, different asset type, geography. So, you know, the number of sources of data, you know, the quality of data that you have, you know, the volume, frequency of data that you have, it's like humongous. And I think, you know, the problem of, you know, variety only complicates issues. Now, if you look at the root cause, the idea is that, you know, if you want to look at, you know, from an analytics point of view, as, you know, Lynn was pointing out, unless you have sort of, you know, a rock solid data foundation, you know, there's absolutely no use of even, you know, talking about, you know, analytics in the first stage. And I think to tackle that, the only way you can do it is, you know, by a standardized or, you know, an industry wide. I know it's sort of, you know, building castles in the air. But if you think about it logically, it's about really, you know, ironing out and figuring out, you know, a standardized data model, which can really be then, you know, adopted by the industry as a whole. Now, if that starts to happen, I think the problems of data, the unstructured data, the way the data sort of, you know, really flows in, and, you know, you're not really even confident about, you know, the data that you're using in your investment processes, that will literally go away. Now, there are ways to sort of, you know, really tackle that. And I think the industry is slowly moving towards it. Now, the thing that we've observed is one of the best ways to do it is when you talk about data in multiple areas, multiple locations, you have like, your tenants, you have, your origination teams, portfolio managers, property managers, asset managers. The best way is to really digitize the data at the source, right? So if you're able to do that, right, using technology, and I think technology is, progressing at that level, right? If you talk about like, Internet of Things, or the way 5G is really getting plugged in, with real estate as an asset class, right? To be able to capture those data points on a real-time basis, and then, pass it on to the system. So I think that is really, transformative, right? That sort of, is happening from a reporting point of view. At the end of it, if you are able to capture that right at the source, the raw data, and feed them into the system, I think you've got the puzzle solved, right? And then it's about building those layers, which I think is the easier bit, as long as your strong data foundation is already there. And I'm sure, I think I would have more to add to this, considering working on the data side. So love to hear more thoughts.
Yep.
Thanks for that. Yeah, Eric.
Important point. Sorry, can I add into it? So data standards, and this is very core to what I do, and I strongly believe that not just as an organization, but as an industry, we need to have some sort of standardization within our data, which should be data definitions and etc. So what we do, if you don't have data standards and we have all the data, we build data silos, and that's not just in the organization. We see it a lot, but then also as industry, we're not really making full use of data that we have. We don't have much data. I mean, I think we have a way to go before we can call ourselves having a big data. But I think the data we have, we can't make use of it because we all have different definition of that. We all call it differently. Even a rent, right? So what does rent mean, or gross rent or net rent? You will see there's a different definition within the same organization. So unless we try to capture that, then the analytics and the usability and the fruits of that data will not be realized. So I chair and founded a firm called REMTech. So it's a real estate technology management peer group. So all the technology peers in other investment forums, we about 40 plus companies now. And one of the major projects that we're working on is actually this data standardization. So we're starting with a very small kind of use case, I think least data standard, but I'm working with, for example, REFI to really start somewhere, right? So because it's been far too long, we've been relying on other people's to come up with something. Right? We're gonna take charge and come up with some sort of standardization. It's not gonna solve every problem, but at least a start to then build on top of that. So I believe, I completely agree. I think data is going to be very, very key going forward for us.
Well, and if I could, I would comment as well. There's so much power in technology today and how it can be utilized from a BI perspective in interpreting, predictive, prescriptive analytics. And to your point, Nikesh, about that standardization of information and terminology and making it meaningful so that there is some consistency within the industry on that analytical side as well. Certainly every sector within the industry, every asset manager or owner investor probably has, some unique requirements, that are specific to their organization. But really being able to harness the power of the technology that's available to our industry today is, hopefully the direction I see us heading.
Yeah, I think that's actually that's the critical point here. I think some of the problems that we're talking about may seem a little sort of, it's like trying to boil the ocean. They may seem too big, but I think the key takeaway for anyone listening to this session is that there is a lot of technology available today that can address at least a big chunk of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. I try not to talk about AI because it's a very loaded topic, and it implies that a machine can actually derive a determination, make a decision based on some logical, algorithms or whatever. And I think in most cases we're neither there yet nor need it yet. But machine learning, robotic process automation,
RPA.
automation of any type it enables real estate investors and management companies to eliminate a lot of the inefficiencies in their current processes, so that they can end up spending more time on analysis and actually making decisions and acting upon those decisions. Before I was involved in sort of product management as a field, I was a consultant. I was doing a lot of consulting, and it's almost comical how much of this happens. You go in, you explain, how, their new system or their new process is going to look, and there are some manual steps in that process, and they look at you like you're an alien. You say, I don't want to do anything manual, but their existing process was so dependent on manual intervention throughout the process. But they didn't realize it because they've been doing it for so long. It just becomes second nature. That's just our process. But there were so many points of potential failure due to manual intervention in that process. And so coming in and being able to say, well, we can eliminate 90% of that. There's still some manual steps there, that you're still a human being trying to make human decisions about a market that's influenced by human beings. Right, and there's not much you can program into a system to account for that. But anything that is repeatable, logical in nature, and can be derived from pretty standard data points, whether it's internal data points, market data points, or things that are cyclical in nature, like the real estate life cycle itself, can be automated. And that can have a huge impact on a company's performance.
Well, and if I could, I'm sorry, specifically in sorry.
Go ahead, Lynn. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to comment. We're seeing a lot of this in our industry. I mean, as a company, right? In terms of the adoption or implementation of RPA, to Eric's point, when you get into those repetitive nature, clerical and process-oriented tasks that can be automated, which is really essentially freeing up valuable human time. And they're creating that ability for those individuals to make higher level core value add decisions without being kind of trapped in the weeds, so to speak. So we are definitely, from our perspective, seeing a faster rate of adoption of some of those technologies as well.
Great. And yeah, the only thing I was going to ask was if anyone has any, Eric was really outlining the kind of the character of what a task would look like for this. But do you have any specific examples of where it's been particularly useful? Machine learning in recent times anyway.
I can. Sam, sorry. I think an example comes to mind. I was highlighting in terms of obviously there are manual processes. You can't really do away with them. But the point is that from a technology perspective, as long as the quantifiable process, which you can really run through using technology, if you can automate that process, I think from a data capture point of view, you are really streamlining your entire process then. Now, I think I'll give you some example, which we've experienced, firsthand, when we were implementing, a solution for our clients. Traditionally, when you go for, let's say, looking at a transaction, you will go to, present the deal, to the investment committee. Typically, it's an offline process, right? You would create a docket, present it to the, investment committee. They'll approve or reject the deal. Now, that's an offline process, which is outside the system. Now, what that happens is, you end up losing a lot of information when that process has not been embedded in the overall technology ecosystem. Now, data is just one part of the puzzle. It's about also embedding technology in that entire process. Now, what you can do in particularly the example I'm quoting is you can really streamline the process using technology. So rather than the approval process happening in the email or let's say an in-person meeting, you really realign your processes so that all the quantifiable decision making is happening via technology. And when that happens, you're really realigning your processes in addition to capturing the data. so that nobody can really obviate that entire process now. So you're tackling like two problems. You've captured the data, and then you've obviously also realigned your processes to make it more technology driven, which is basically aligning to the fact that, okay, you can then really run large processes. You can streamline it, you can make it more efficient, and take the decision or the manual subjectivity out of it. There's obviously going to be a subjectivity, but to the extent is possible. And I think there are obvious benefits to it. So everything being digitized, from an investment point of view, you have that information which you can utilize, for your future deals. It's always there in the system. It's always there in the data lake that you've created, and then you can utilize it, as part of the entire process, going forward.
Yep. Just to add to Kanam, I think as also Eric mentioned, so a lot of AI is not really AI honestly in the market. It's really an RPA. It's just within the process itself. But I mean, I can tell you that I've been trying to look into a real AI system. So I've been trialing a couple of systems in the space where we're just trying to solve a very, very simple problem. So we have all these property managers all across the world, and they have their own system. They use MRIs and UIs and Argus, whatever you have it. And what we need back in our organization, that data, we need granular level data that then we can actually use. But if you look at the overall process, it's very, very inefficient. So it takes far long. Everyone have their own way of doing things. So we have been trialing a couple of systems in the space whereby the system actually, what it does, it captures all the data from the source systems. It then standardizes it, and then it then posts into this data lake or whatever system we have in downstream. So you might say this is an RPI. Yes, it's an RPI, but if you look into detail, is actually the system is actually learning. The key difference between RPI and machine learning is that RPI will do the same action again and again at the same time. It's not really adding any value to it. A machine learning will become better as we use it. So we're already seeing this pattern that the system understands the pattern and the behavior. It understands different languages. It understands what it means by that. Try to guess what could be the approximation of that. So if someone puts a kind of number in a date, it try to convert that into data and say, does that make sense? Or if try to understand also if there's a future lease that's expiring in 2078, it will say, does that even make sense? So it's that sort of level of AI intelligence that comes into it that makes predictions, and also it tells you what prediction is making, and you can say, you know what, I agree with that, or I disagree. And based on that feedback, it improves every time you feed into the data. So I practical examples that we're already using it, and there are far more, I think, advanced examples that I think will be get. I mean, soon. I mean, how soon? That's a question mark, but that's definitely on the roadmap.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you commented, Nikesh, on the difference and the distinction between the RPA and the AI, because I do think there's often a misconception there. The RPA being mimicking a repeatable, executable process, and then moving into the AI element where you can add, it's actually thinking and looking for those anomalies and making predictive and prescriptive analytics and applying that to your information. And it's certainly the power of the solution is there, and it's that rate of adoption that we really need to focus on.
Absolutely, great. Yeah. It's an interesting topic. Honestly, I think we should have definitely a separate session. So it's the applicability of AI in real estate. That's my favorite topic. Yeah. So there are a lot more applicability and possibility, right?
And I would just add very quickly. I would just add very, very quickly, and I'm sure Lynn will agree with me that in those cases where either the technology isn't as advanced as it should be, or there are challenges associated with adopting it, we shouldn't forget that in some cases managed services are actually an incredible solution to the problem. We at MRI, we have certain managed services, whether it's around accounting or data or what have you, and a lot of our partners do have some incredible offerings. And it can be an extremely cheap, effective way to do a lot of repetitive processes. And even those managed services are utilizing automation tools. So, you know, we shouldn't forget that that's actually in some cases a great solution to the problem.
Thank you. And certainly to your point, yes, we do as a company look at utilizing technology within our own organization to drive our internal efficiencies as well, and applying that for our clients. You know, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach. It certainly can be baby steps and how we can step in and provide that assistance to folks.
Yeah, there are a lot of companies that have large portfolios, complex data needs, but actually run very lean. The team itself is very small. And in those instances, especially if you're working with multiple property managers or vendors or lenders or what have you, you know, it might just be beyond your scope, and maybe the technology perhaps is also beyond the scope of what the company can adopt and manage. So in those cases, a managed service could be a much more cost-effective option than hiring a team of data scientists, and you know but something to consider.
No, I mean honestly, I had actually debate about this with someone, you know, managed service or outsourcing or in-house, and I'm a big proponent of a outsourcing model. Why? Just, I mean, as you said, most of the real estate companies have very lean teams. Plus, we are experts in our investments and investment decisions, but technology and data is actually not our expertise. So a lot of people actually, when I had a debate, a lot of people questioned that shouldn't we be owning this data? Like this, I said, yeah. The difference between data management and data ownership. Ownership should always be with the client, right? For example, I'm a client, should be there. But management could be outsourced, right? So the key difference. I mean, there are so much great advantage. I mean, cost is one thing, but I think look at scalability and the flexibility, and also, I mean, you guys or the people who are managed service, they have the benefit that that's what they do. That's what they live and breathe. That's what their specialty is. It's like going to a teacher for, you know, your tooth problem, because we are not data experts. I mean, I would not claim to be that, you know, real estate firms will be data experts. You will have data experts and data science teams and a RPI team. So I'm a big proponent of that, but there has to be, as I said, the ownership will always have to be in-house, and that's it, I would say, adds great value and create more efficiency within the business.
And there's certainly a fine line.
No,
go ahead, Sam.
Go on then.
Oh, I was just going to comment. Go ahead.
So, there's obviously a tiny delay that's causing chaos, but I think it's on my side. All I was going to do was just ask Nikesh, you know, I guess the outsourcing model is pretty well established now, so I guess potentially a more interesting question is when would you, on the investment management side, when would you actually decide to build something? Would it be something that's in-house? Would it be something that's particularly niche or that can't be bought outside, or what would be the decision to build?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'm not wrong in saying that we actually look at, first and foremost, anything that we have a new problem or something that PGIM, I mean, PGIM Real Estate is a part of a bigger firm, PGIM and Prudential, right? So we got over 5,000-6,000 applications. So I think what we do internally, we look at, do we have another kind of investment arm that is already doing something, and then we will always from by default go out and look for the you can say a SaaS product, where now more and more, right? Because that's where we believe that we can be more, we can scale more quickly and go to market approach. For example, if you want to buy something for investor facing product, then it's much easier for us to go to a you can say out of the, you know, box application and modify it, which has all the functionality and all the controls and all the security that is required. Then to build ourselves, it would take more long time, and plus, I mean, it would be also a bit risk in that perspective, because we're not really an expert in developing these things. So more and more now, I mean, only in very rare cases where we do not find an application which solves a critical problem for us, then we will build it in-house. but it has to be a rare occurrence. But most of the times we go out in the market. I mean, I've looked at the last 2 years. I mean, everything has been outside. I've looked at outward, look at problem statement. Okay, what we have externally, I mean, from document management to workflow to data management to a lot of applications, we looked into it. They were all outsourced.
Interesting. Lynn, do you want to add anything before we come to the questions? Because we've got quite a few coming, which is yes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would say we can move to the questions or whatever your
Great.
next step.
Sure. Let's head some of the questions because some of these were actually were on my list anyway. So let's start with if you don't mind, I'll start with the third one. I don't know whether anyone could take this about data compliance. So obviously with GDPR in Europe, we've seen California adopt some data privacy rules as well. I guess has there been for the real estate for management sector, has there been any kind of, which obviously there has because we use data. What are the implications here? And MMPI, I think, means material non-public information about insider trading risk, potentially, but that probably isn't as relevant for this. So more about on the privacy side. Are there any kind of compliance issues, particularly when you're kind of inputting third-party data? Do you want to have a go at how they might address some of the compliance issues that data would create?
I mean, from PGIM, we classify data into, 5 buckets, right? So each and every data point is classified. Whatever data comes into PGIM, classified in that way. So whenever we are sharing outside this data, we have control around that. So for example, PI or PII data, right? So we have, for example, tenant data. Do I need to have the tenant names, actual residential tenant names or not? So that would be the decision. No, we don't need to. If we do, then there are additional controls and initial protocols that you need a certain level of approval to get access to the data. So, I mean, that's something that, we do a regular kind of check, and all our contracts and all our data points that we have, we classify that in those buckets.
Yeah, and I would add encryption components, dual authentication, certainly all those parameters that can be implemented surrounding that exchange of information, just to ensure that the data security, which has always been a concern, and probably even more so now as we're seeing this huge rush and push in the digital space.
Like to add, yes, and to add to what Nakash was highlighting in terms of if you end up right, I'm talking more from a service product point of view rather than sort of an investor like Nakash. If you look at from a service product point of view, there are a couple of sort of alignments or things that you got to do when you're talking about post GDPR, right? May 2018 came into effect. So one is more sort of operational, that contractually, etc. You got to make sure that not only from a classification point of view, but you are also enhancing the solution to be able to comply with the overall regulation, which means the solution should be in a position to be able to delete at the request of the data owner or the processor or the controller of the data. So the service provider essentially becomes a processor, and the owner obviously is the data controller. So the request of the controller, which will be received from the data subject, I think eventually what the service providers industry needed to do was to really enhance the solution to add those functionalities, right? So if a personally identifiable information is being received, first to classify them accurately, and then you also add the option of giving the data subjects an availability to delete their information at the request. So that's, I think, also sort of impacting directly, indirectly, the service providers such as ourselves as well. And we've been able to do that, right? Both indirectly as well as enhancing the solution to comply with GDPR as a regulation.
Great. There's a question for you here, Nakash. It's not quite a technology question as such, but it's more about the information that what key data investors want. So I guess this is about a communication point. Like what key data do you need to communicate to investors today? And you mentioned retail investors as well. I guess how might the comms on that change if and when real estate assets become more, I can't think of the word, more retail focused investor wise?
That's a huge topic, like what investors want. I mean, just not a summary. Of course, I think they want the performance of the assets, performance of the fund, how the fund is done, what is, I mean, the you can say projections are, what is in the plan, what is the budget for that, what is the exit strategy, you know, etc. I mean, there are a lot of data points that we do. This is like traditional LP. What I think when it comes to retail investor, I have been actually retail investor in part myself. It's actually the availability of data. They would like to get the data on hand, so they can actually, for example, they go to the fund A, which is, for example, let's say an open-end fund. They want to see, okay, how many assets we have. They can actually really Google and go down to the asset level, and they can actually view the asset, right? And they can actually understand the performance of the asset at the time. But if you look at that, it's not available. Plus, secondly, I believe that show the social impact or the environmental impact of the asset or of the fund. That will be very important. So how much carbon emission is happening in the asset or with the fund, what kind of social impact it has, negative or positive. I think the retail investor, although I mean traditional investors or they also want that, but it's on a very high level. But I think retail investor, when come into it, they will want more of granular level, but more regular and more frequent data. So that's in a nutshell summary, but as I said, it's a very open question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact,
A huge question, but I guess what a more I guess a different. Go on, Lynn. Sorry, you got something to add.
oh no, I wanted to comment specifically on that as it relates to the retail sector and getting even granular in fundamentals in terms of managing sales data, for example, and understanding the correlation to occupancy cost, which further is an indicator of the health of that tenant. So having that ability to have real-time information so you can proactively identify, hey, is this going to be a problem down the road? So that was my only comment. Thank you.
Great. Okay, cool. We've got a few more questions about investors here, but we're coming to the end a little bit, so I just want to make sure we're leaving enough time to kind of ask the question about what's next. Really, actually, it's very similar. That's just popped up on the screen. Actually, what is the most exciting technological change you're seeing today? I guess a version of that question, really. You know, what's next for this sector? You've talked a little bit about how machine learning is kind of revolutionizing aspects of certain tasks. What's kind of is it the development of that technology that's going to be the biggest change over the next 5 years, or is there something else brewing? Maybe it's blockchain, or maybe it's something else. I wonder whether each of you could maybe just kind of pick something that you think might affect the most change in the sector. It's probably a bit tough. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, but if there's something like that which you feel might be revolutionary or evolutionary, then it'd be good to sort of highlight to finish off. Nikash, do you want to go first about something which is changed?
There are few, exactly. So I think I would say number one, of course, the applicability of blockchain. So not just blockchains, how we can tokenize an asset, make it more liquid, and go to the secondary market and sell it. I think as a class, then this as a class will be available to more people, and I believe it will actually overall benefit the sector. We will have much more money coming into the sector. Other one actually would say the digital twins. So applicability of digital twins. So we already have applications that build digital twins, but we don't really use it. So it's something I think maybe a regulator or government would really push for it. They will ask for it, or coming from an investor asking for like digital twin of a building. So you are really able to understand your building. And of course, we're talking about digital twin of cities and stuff like that. So that's, for me, very exciting, because you can really pinpoint everything. For example, when it comes to planning, etc. So what impact that's going to have on environment, that building, or what impact it's going to have overall on the ground in the area, etc. So that's really, really important. So the other thing, I think applicability, I've talked about it and questioned about the applicability of AI that I see myself in future, what it can do to the sector, and a lot of efficiency that we have within the investment process, right? So from sourcing, underwriting to reporting, I think the advancement of that and automating of that, I think that's exciting for me. I
think to add to that, I think
Eric, Go on, Kanav, you go.
Just to sort of add another perspective to
Okay.
sort of what Nikash was highlighting in terms of new technologies. So one way really to I think look at what's going to be next is to really go down to the sort of basics, right? If you look at even the emergence of bitcoins, right? So why they came into existence was there was a problem in a centralized system, and you want to make it like decentralized. That's why sort of it's really ballooned, right, in terms of the frenzy it has created. Now, if we talk about real estate as an asset class, there are four fundamental issues or challenges or characteristics, as you can say. I mean, obviously, highly liquid asset class. It's highly heterogeneous. You can't sort of have own a small part of it, and I think the processes are inefficient. And I think there is a lack of transparency as well, right? When you have when you do a deal. Now, if you combine all of these challenges, what Nakash was highlighting, I mean, that is what blockchain is basically solving for real estate as an asset class. So combining the challenges around making it more liquid, making it more transparent, making it super efficient, to the line of making it like a straight through processing, like you do on a capital market trade. So unlike a real estate trade, which takes like weeks to happen, the blockchain technology is really aligning and moving it to a world where it happens like like that, right? At the click of a button. Now that all of those challenges are like real challenges, which is why I think not just blockchain, IoT technology, making availability of data, which is being a core problem of real estate, globally. And that's why I think these technologies eventually are going to take steam and have more and more adoption across the globe.
Great, thank you. And Eric, do you want to talk about what you think is the most exciting change at the moment and over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything that's been discussed with respect to blockchain and digital twin, artificial intelligence. Maybe I should focus on the interim, right? What's happening sort of between now and when we get there. I think there's two things I would call out. One is better technology to facilitate collaboration, right? Today, a lot of companies, MRI especially, we talk a lot about, leveraging APIs and microservices to allow different applications to talk to each other and to sort of integrate workflows across disparate systems. And that's critical. It allows companies to pick and choose the solution that is best suited to solve a specific problem in their business, not just one solution and hope for the best. So that is critical, and that needs to keep evolving. We need to be more, focused on allowing disparate systems to talk to each other, to standardize data sets, and to just allow for workflows across these different groups and systems. But I think it needs to go one step beyond that, because it's not just collaboration within the organization, it's also collaboration with third-party providers and vendors and the tenants and residents within the building, the occupiers of the building, your employees, for example, the investors, of course. There needs to be, and there will be, a much easier ability for all of these different consumers of the real estate, right? I don't know what the best way to say it, but people who are interacting with the real estate, whether they own it or they're just living in it or occupying it, they need to be able to have a feedback loop that's in real time, so that decisions can be made when it comes to capital planning, to addressing specific problems, etc. And so that's going to really require more online portals embedded directly into these systems, allowing people to get real-time updates to whatever problems they have, and that also involves, I think, a much more efficient, automated process around documents, contracts, agreements, being able to OCR documents, being able to sign electronically, being able to cut through a lot of the red tape, because these stringent automated capabilities. So that's a long-winded answer, but yes, being able to collaborate more efficiently in real time across all the different disparate groups.
Great, thank you. And we're just running out of time. So, Lynn, the final word to you on this. What would
thank you.
What would you say?
I would say, first of all, Eric, you stole my answer, but certainly first, I would agree with that sentiment 100%. And that's the ability to see us collaborate and collate information from disparate systems and get it into a centralized location so that you can have meaningful data to make informed decisions on and apply that predictive and prescriptive analytics to those solutions. I think also the digital twin space and IoT and sensor data, and as we look to solve for reoccupancy, air quality, ESG, compliance components, just real-time information through sensor data, I think is really, we're going to see a much, a bigger push in that space as well in that. So I think that's going to be pretty exciting, that together with that digital twin and the sensor data for safe reoccupancy and getting folks back to work and all of the information that we just even at a facility level, building owner management want access to.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We've run out of time now, but that flew by. So I hope you enjoyed that. It was great to get so many questions as well. So thank you for the audience for sending so many in. And I'd just like to highlight our next webinar, which is on the screen at the moment. It's about the German multifamily and industrial landscape. So a pretty hot geography there in Europe with two of the hottest sectors as well, beds and jets. That's on the 8th of July, and do join us for that. But it's just for me to thank Lynn Peters, Kanav Kalia, Eric Kogan, and Natasha here. Thank you very much for your thoughts and contributions, and hopefully I will see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
Yes.